I've never been as optimistic in my lifetime than I was about 3 years ago when the Arab Revolution started.
If I want to live as I have to, as a free person, I have to fight the system. It's not my state of mind, it's a whole generational state of mind in all places.
We've never seen so many people out in the streets with so many demands that are so just, doing it so beautifully, so humorly, so peacefully.
We managed to get rid of dictatorship.
We will have democratic processes in our region.
We are the example of a good life, of a fair life, and that's what we are dreaming about.
It's just the beginning. It's not the end.
We've never seen that. I have never seen that in my lifetime. So for 3 years, we've been on our toes. Is this going to work? Is it not going to work out? Will the people come back? Should we maintain the hope? But recently, things have really changed. Almost a new chapter was opened in the region where the ones who have governed for years and years and failed for years and years, the most organized, the most conservative, the most reactionary, came back with vengeance. They took the time to reorganize when everyone was on the streets and perhaps in disagreement or not about what kind of future they want to have. The forces of the past, the forces of the dark era of the Arab world were actually organizing in secret with an attempt to silence their opposition forever. The entire region is sandwiched between old forces that want to come back and rule as they did before in the most repressive ways, and new forces, counter-revolutionary forces, if you will, that are terribly medieval, terribly hyperbolic, terribly suicidal, ready to do anything to get what they want. And all of that is done also with a lot of religious seasoning, if you will. It was announced that General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had won with 96.7% of the vote.
I swear by God that I shall loyally preserve the Constitution of the Republic and respect the law. I shall preserve the people's interest and maintain the independence, unity and security of the nation.
Really? But nobody laughed, which is peculiar because getting 90% of the vote is practically a badge that says, I am a dictator. Well, it's in the Egyptian tradition. It's what the dictator they'd recently overthrown used to do. How did General Sisi do it? How did he get the Egyptian people to come out and vote for another general who had come to power through a coup? Step 1, destroy the opposition. Then silence the truth.
Some 7 stations have been raided and shut down. CNN has also felt pressure. Soldiers tried to seize its equipment in the middle of a live broadcast.
They're trying to take away our camera.
I was doing my job as a reporter, and despite the authorities knowing this, I have been detained for 266 days without any charge.
We expect the judge to acknowledge the lack of any specific evidence. And just to be sure, kill the joke.
Egypt at the moment doesn't have a democracy. It has a democracy.
Egypt's top TV satirist Bassem Youssef announced that his show would stay off the air indefinitely.
3, 2.
In Syria, Bashar al-Assad also had an election. Never mind that he was in the midst of a civil war.
الدكتور بشار حافظ الأسد 10 ملايين 80.7% من عدد الأصوات الصحيحة.
ومنزل العالم نزل العالم بالطريقة.
Today the man is having an election. He's brought people into the streets using his own methods. 5 days ago, the Air Force raided Jobar 25 times, which is 5 kilometers away from the Republican Palace. And he's having an election. That means this whole time violence has been a political means. A means that ended any legitimacy the authority had on the people and any legitimacy the people had in participating in politics. That's the role of violence. Today, violence is destroying the society itself.
The real issue here is not the credibility of elections. If somebody is elected, everybody's being elected in the Arab world with 80 and 90%. Algeria, Egypt, Syria. So
it's not even the lack of credibility of elections.
These are not serious exhibitions of democratic pluralism.
But the narrative that was sold is that they were the saviors of their nation.
The narrative that was created by the media that we need someone, a strong man, who can keep the country united and he can take the country forward. But this would be absolutely at the expense of democracy and human rights and freedoms.
So what you're saying is elections in the case of Egypt is the substitute for democracy. It's not the application of democracy.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, democracy is not only elections. Democracy means many things. It means pluralism. It means that you have political openness. That
the Arab Spring did not deliver or has not delivered the aspirations that everybody was looking for. Last couple of months, you have elections in 4 republics. Algeria, you have in Egypt, you have in Syria, and you have even in Iraq. And the old guards, the old establishment is back with more legitimacy from their perspective. What does that tell you? That tells you that the Arab Spring, at least in its first wave, was crushed successfully. It did not affect other republics, and it has minimal impact on other parts of the Arab world, mainly the GCC countries.
So what does it mean to conduct an elections after you have silenced, imprisoned, or killed?
Don't forget that half of Syrians actually did not vote, because half of the Syrians actually are either displaced internally inside the country, or, I mean, we have something like 3 million people, refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and Iraq, of course, many other places around the world.
What is this going to mean to the Muslim Brotherhood now in Egypt? How much is that of its own fault, and how much is that of the fault and the conspiracy of others against it?
Well, since the beginning of the coup last July, you have 2 narratives. One of them says that the Brotherhood has been failed by other people because this sort of regional counter-revolution that were supported by some regional powers. The other narrative says that no, the Brotherhood failed because they mismanagement the situation in Egypt. They did not have a specific strategy on how to reform the economy, how to open the political space for other people.
And that they weren't very democratic.
Yes, yes, some people would say that they are not that democratic, all right? But here we are. We ended up with that a very authoritarian process that led not only to the exclusion of the Muslim Brotherhood, but even to exclude to all other political forces. Killing of people, arresting activists, this kind of mass death sentence that came by the Egyptian judiciary. So you are not talking about a real, healthy and democratic...
We are surprised that the oldest political party in the Arab world, which is the Muslim Brotherhood in this case, was established in 1928. Yes, 28, yes. And they suddenly come to power in Egypt after free, fair elections by all accounts, yeah? And they were not, in the opinion of so many people, they were not actually up to the job.
Absolutely, the Brotherhood was not competent. They failed in managing Egypt. But the question is, what would be the best way to get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Wait till the next elections?
Exactly, by the coup or by elections.
Sure. In Syria, it's completely different because you have a regime which was from the very beginning, that was the choice of the regime, to use violence from day one in order to quash the uprising by using maximum violence.
That was the Bashar al-Assad wisdom.
But this is the typically authoritarian argument over the last 3 decades, that the only way to counter terrorism or to bring stability is by crushing the opposition.
The tactic or the strategy to turn the peaceful revolutions into some sort of form of extremism and then fight it out, has that succeeded? Are we now in the midst of a war on terror?
I think that's an excuse for a war on reform,
a war on change, a war on democracy, a war on freedom. General Sisi is not the first Egyptian general to use the war on terror as an excuse for autocracy. Mubarak used the same excuse for autocracy.
The real problem that we have is that things could get much worse. That in fact the real dangers are that employing this kind of rhetoric, the war on terror rhetoric, and employing the kind of really broad-based abandonment of all the principles that people are fighting for in the Arab world: accountability, transparency, the rule of law, these very things that people have already died for. Those things, when you abandon them and then assume that somehow you can win a war by doing those things, but they were the very things that actually led to the problems that we have now.
The strategists tried to shift the narrative.
He has killed the people for a simple reason. This was his plan all along. The Syrian people are the ones who carried out this revolution. Therefore, they need to be punished for raising up against their masters. If you don't believe in divine right, there is hereditary right which says the president's son must become the next president. If not, then the president's daughter must be the next president. Even the president's dog must become president of the dogs.
For instance, Egypt, much of the support of Sisi, is coming from the image that he would be the savior of the country, that he could bring stability.
This has been the survival strategy of these regimes for decades now. It's either me or these terrorists.
So now we moved from either me or the flood to me or the terrorists.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And that's working.
And this, I think, yes. So far in Syria, I'm talking at least about Syria. At least, if the regime has not succeeded, at least there is enough confusion in Syria to allow everybody to think that, look, maybe we need to reconsider our position concerning the removal of this regime, i.e. the regime of Bashar al-Assad. The future in Syria, the future of Syria in the coming years will not be decided by Syrians. This has become a war by proxy in which all the regional and international powers actually are trying to fight each other on Syrian land, on Syrian soil, until the last drop of Syrian blood.
The Arab uprising unleashed the energies of freedom, of justice, of all those sort of slogans that we've heard. But it seems that the Arab Revolution have also unleashed some of our worst sides.
They shot at our demonstrators. He was shot right through the head. I had two friends watching this happen.
Three years ago, when popular demonstrations, Facebook and Twitter, toppled Hosni Mubarak, it looked like there was an alternative to al-Qaeda, a viable, working alternative. Now, all that looks to be a failure. Elections, peaceful demonstrations, Twitter have failed. And al-Qaeda is saying, look, it doesn't work. Jihad is the only answer. Violence, terrorism. That's not true. Jihad is not the only answer. But in the minds of many, the al-Qaeda extremist narrative has been validated by the events of the last 3 years.
It's what we call the deep state. Powerful bureaucrats, powerful generals, powerful secret services, powerful judges, powerful media men, powerful businessmen, all of them, they have seen a direct threat to their position, to their power. The things of the revolution that it unified all of these groups to work together in order to destroy the new comers, the new revolution.
We live in a world in 2014 where al-Qaeda has said ISIS is too extreme for us. That is the hallmark of the failure on the war on terror, that you now have groups, indirect consequences of the war on terror, where you have these, strands of a virus, because extremism it's only a virus. It's just that, you know that when you have extremism in your society, that there's a failure in your society.
The Arab world has never really turned against itself.
At the very moment you think you've got it beat, it develops a new strand, a really, really nasty strand, and immunizes itself against this kind of work.
In Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city, ISIS struck gold, literally. They robbed that city's central bank, taking a large amount of gold and an estimated $430 million.
Maliki recently, when he made his speech, he was appealing to Islam and to tribalism, both of which are stronger than he is. Those forces of Islam and tribalism, Saddam did the same, Gaddafi did the same, every leader who's in trouble does the same. So this is the real story.
So we are reinstating the old establishment, as if the Arab Spring has never materialized, has never happened. You have non-state actors more powerful than the state. The Iraqi people don't believe that they belong to Iraq. The Kurds are now, they have their own entity. The Shiite are talking about now jihad against the Sunnis, and the Sunnis are left to dry.
Most of the Arab countries suffer the same kind of underlying tensions and stresses and problems that have exploded to the surface in Iraq and Syria. Sectarianism, autocracy, corruption, mismanagement, abuse of powers, divisive politics, huge disparities in socioeconomic needs, violence, non-state actors. Every problem that you see in Iraq and Syria mirrors these problems around the regions.
The order that came after colonialism, those states, those borders, those entities now are seeing their demise?
These are not countries where rule is vested in the citizens, and I would not call them
official names.
I know, but they're not republics. They're not republic, and these are not elections. These are assertions of power by militarily backed families. It's families with armies. It's incredible, and this is why people revolted.
And you see that narrative has been advanced by the Iranians and their proxies, by al-Maliki in Iraq, by Bashar al-Assad in Syria, by Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. All of them are fighting jihadists and terrorists, which are Sunni radicals. And even you go to North Africa with Sisi now, his agenda, if you watch his speech, the priority is counterterrorism, along with Haftar, along even with the Algerian generals. Yeah, this is now the new phenomena that bears to be watched.
The frightening thing about this is that most of the problems we have now, including Daesh in Iraq and terror groups all over the place and fundamentalist militants, these people were born as a consequence of the last 13 years of the war on terror. And the war on terror started after 9/11. There was probably maybe 1,000 people in Afghanistan and Peshawar and Hague who were armed with Qaeda and these guys. Now, 12, 13 years later, there's probably 50,000, mostly in Iraq and Syria.
A grand study issued a study just early June 2014 stated that since 2007, the number of jihadist groups have increased, and the number of affiliates, jihadist volunteers or recruit, have doubled even to 100,000 plus. What does that tell you? The military advisor of the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, stated openly, and he was the former Revolutionary Guards commander, that the Iranian empire now stretches from Iran to the Mediterranean on the Israeli borders for the third time in its history. What does that tell you? That tells you, awakens what King Abdullah of Jordan stated, the Shi'i arc, that is giving services and providing services now to counter-revolution, so counter-terrorism.
Let's start with what you said earlier. Can we say that the regimes will be able to go back to the pre-January 25th, 2011, to the pre-Arab Revolution, Arab uprising?
They can do that for a short period of time. You can kill enough people and starve enough people and siege enough people to placate them or keep them quiet, but for a very short period of time.
It is not one size fits all.
Because I see a lot of borders being blurred now. Certainly in the case of Syria and Iraq.
ISIS now demolished the borders between Syria and Iraq.
So what does that mean?
Well, I think we've seen this going on for the last 15 years or so in the Levant, particularly. We saw it before in Somalia. We've seen it in Yemen. It's been happening in the fringes of the Arab world. But in the Western Asian region, we've seen this happening, the free movement of fighters, weapons, drugs, people, money, and ideologies. These borders don't mean very much in most of these countries. The reason is that...
the trans-tribal and the trans-ethnic?
Well, you have three forces that are the still very powerful forces in the Arab world that are stronger than the state identity: tribalism, Islamism, and Arabism. We have seen the creation of a public political sphere. That is, people act in public. Now, they don't all act nicely. Some of them are killers, like Daesh and these guys. The governments are killers. You have political parties, labor unions, all kinds of movements now, football hooligans. Everybody is now acting in public. This is good. This is a positive development, and we will see how this rolls on and evolves. It took Western countries many, many years to get to stable, democratic, pluralistic republics.
They went even through wars and civil wars.
But
there are 2 points.
So you guys are saying it's going to take decades?
And the double irony is that when the West does use pinprick approaches like drone killings, which they've done in the last 10 years, that has vastly increased the number of recruits who go to these terrorist militant groups because of the resentment of
and killing innocent people in Yemen and in Afghanistan and apologizing and even alienating leaders who are allies of United States, like Karzai and like Nawaz Sharif in Pakistan.
So you're saying that the American role has been counterproductive?
Regarding terrorism, you mean? Or
regarding the Arab uprisings, regarding...
Of course. Flip-flopping and not calling a coup, for instance, in Egypt, not dealing effectively, wishy-washy, flip-flopping. They have not really...
Syria?
Regarding Syria, of course, also. I mean, if the United States and the West were really... they have leverage, but unfortunately, they are not using it.
And I would focus less on the U.S. I would focus more on the indigenous regimes in the region and the bigger regimes, non-Arab regimes, Iran, Turkey, and others, Israel, and around here. You know, there's 3 basic reasons why this whole region, if we take the whole region in the last 50 years, why has it gotten into this ridiculous situation now where 500,000 refugees in one day leave Mosul? It's unbelievable. And you have 5-6 million displaced Syrians. How did this happen?
Because they don't believe in the state.
Well, 3 things.
The state
I think 3 things. First,
fake.
the main problem is the poor quality of governance and the use of power in Arab countries by the Arab regime. Second one is the impact of the Arab-Israeli conflict in Israel. And the third one is the external foreign factor, including creating some of these states 100 years ago. But those 3 together have brought us to this situation. But I would anchor the main problem in the incompetent, often corrupt Arab governance. And people like Maliki have had a chance in Iraq.
For 8 years.
Other people have had a chance to make reforms. They just never did.
Iraq is not getting better, any worse. So where Israel-Palestine is concerned, Israeli transitions. Post-American invasion and occupation of Iraq, things are not looking better. And the Arab regimes are getting more stubborn, more violent.
They're back to the old establishment.
More authoritarian.
When we return, we examine political Islam, sectarianism, and democracy, and ask, what is the future likely to bring? Must we despair? Or is there reason for hope?
I'm not only optimistic about Tunisia, I'm optimistic about the youth in this whole region. I do believe in revolution, personally.
I do also. Everyone believes in revolution?
Do you think that we're gonna stop after all these challenges? No.
The issue of religion, Islamism, and state, the issue of dictatorships and democracy, and the issue of unity and the dismantlement of state. So these issues are across the region. You can see them from Algeria to Iraq. And people are resorting to their primordial, most basic instincts and identities. So instead of being an Arab, instead of being an Iraqi and a Syrian, instead of being a citizen, instead of being a man and a woman, now people are Shiite or Alawites or Sunni. People are from the east or from the north. People are from the west or east of Libya. So even regional identities, ethnic identities, national identities of the worst kinds have taken over.
In the world of Western media, if the words Islam and politics are placed anywhere near each other, they automatically conjure up a certain set of terrifying images.
The Islamist terror threat remains a cancer on the globe.
As if all Islamists look alike. Do they? we went to a rally of the Ennahda party, the Islamists of Tunisia, to see for ourselves.
We are dreaming of freedom. We are dreaming of Tunisia that all the people can live together regardless their political opinion, regardless their origin.
The real difference is that Islamists in Tunis were more rational than the Egyptian ones. To be able to compromise, that's the smart thing that Ennahda was able to do.
What are the values you believe in?
Peace. Everybody are free. Freedom.
Lately, they're trying to make us believe that there's a problem with the Jewish people living in Tunisia. There's none. It's not. There's no problem. We accept them. They do their religion's stuff, and we do ours, and we live in peace. There's no problem.
Tunisian people are no longer afraid of the Islamic boogie.
We're humans at the end.
I'm going to vote for the first time, so I'm looking forward.
Who are you voting for?
Ennahda, of course.
Yet, without a doubt, religion remains a serious issue.
Now you could cut it with a knife. This sectarian thing, Shi'i, Sunni tension. Yesterday I saw one of the leaders, Al-Hakim, one of the leaders of the Shi'i in Iraq, wearing military fatigue. And Sistani asking his people to go for
Ayatollah Sistani. Yeah.
Ayatollah Sistani, the grand Ayatollah Sistani,
leader, yes.
the spiritual leader for the Shiites, not in Iraq, in many countries, Shiite faith, to go and carry arms to fight the Sunni hardliners. It's really very, very sad what we are now witnessing in our part of the world. We should have better than this.
But
the whole world now...
But you think this is going to get to the Gulf region?
There is a fear. I just came from Kuwait, and there is fear that Daesh, with its map, including Kuwait, is that we are now in the front line. We are up in the front line. We are only 100 kilometers away from the Iraqi borders. And Iraq is a failed state by all its means and its components. And with Daesh coming, with the Iranians coming, with the Shi'i Sunni tension is rising because of the sectarian politics in the region, we are really now facing a major hurdle.
Some countries, by the way, I think some countries 10 years from now will not be in the same shape they are now. Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Libya, and Sudan already started, are the ones that have the most chance to reconfigure their borders.
There is a clear now movement towards the fragmentation. We could see it in Iraq, especially the artificial states or the multi-ethnic, multi-sectarian states. The Kurds, the Sunnis, by all practical purpose, for all practical purposes, Iraq is a divided country. It just, you have the show of a state, but it's not really a state.
But you know the problem...
Syria also is another candidate to have another fragment. Even Lebanon down the road could witness something like that.
Does the Islamic world split into three parts? Radical Sunnis like ISIS, an Iranian hegemony over the Shia region that seemed to include cooperation with the West, and finally, restored dictators.
So there will be a short-term clinging on to great military leaders who will bring instability, and then the problems that drove the revolutions will come back again: unemployment. Yeah, exactly.
Absence of job, absence of security.
Plus again, the military leaders are now on top.
And the biggest
on top.
The biggest single problem, I would say, in the modern Arab world, in my life, I'm 65 years old, the biggest problem that has shaped my life and the whole Arab world is governments run by military men.
And
this is the catastrophe.
Reform versus revolution. Is this the first lesson now that, look, revolutions can get really bloody, can destabilize states? Perhaps, at least in authoritarian countries, rather than the totalitarian ones, maybe we should be talking now about reform.
Well, people have been talking about reform in many Arab countries.
So they haven't been listening.
Well, it hasn't been done, exactly. And it got to a point where people's grievances and discomfort, and even, I would say, their dehumanization at living in countries that were corrupt, that were mismanaged, where poverty was growing, and all of this done by their own regimes, not Israeli occupiers or American or British armies, their own regimes, got to the point where they were dehumanized and they erupted. So I think the lesson is when citizens express reasonable grievances, that there should be a reasonable response to them by the ruling authorities. The second lesson is that citizens have rights. They're not only consumers. The Arab people in the last 40 years have been basically given the right to go to shopping malls and buy as many cell phones as they want and buy and sell land and do things like that. They have no political rights whatsoever in any meaningful way.
Because we are developing countries. We have not gotten there as the West 500 years. But there is a major formula here that maybe we should talk about. The design that you stated, you are correct. There is a design to have this instability. I mean, as if these leaders, the autocrats, would like to tell their people, listen, guys, you have two choices. Either you bear our autocracy with security, you're not going to be leaving your 500,000 in one day from Mosul, or you have your democracy with chaos. Which one would you choose? So the design is there. Now some people are harking back to the days of Mubarak, or Ben Ali, or even Saddam Hussein. At least during these days, as they say, we had stability. We used to go to work. We were oppressed. We cannot open our mouth only when we go to the dentist. But at the end of the day, we have stability. We have our jobs. Now we are homeless. We are uprooted. We are displaced. We are killed. We are dying. And we don't have democracy. So which one is better? This is the end game.
But my understanding is that the new barter goes like this. I will give you stability, you give me back your freedoms. I give you security, you give up on social justice. I give you some sort of a job, you give up on freedom.
Like Libyans now would prefer Gaddafi, or most of the Libyans at least.
I mean, they prefer stability.
Yeah, they prefer stability.
Now, because stability is the major thing for you to thrive. You cannot thrive, you cannot even improve your situation if you are living in a tent in a refugee camp.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there's some things we do not know.
The motives for the American invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan are murky and mixed. But whatever their true reasons were, George W. Bush and his advisors clearly imagined that they were bringing democracy to the region. Just topple the statue of Saddam Hussein, and a democratically elected leader would immediately jump up on the platform to replace him. It would be a quick and easy fix.
And we got into Iraq with the belief that it would be a very inexpensive and quick war. I remember when I was in the government and I spoke to people about my misgivings about managing an occupation. They said, but we don't have to manage an occupation in Iraq because everybody's going on a 90-day personal service contract, and then they'll be out. There's no long-term U.S. presence in Iraq, so why are you concerned?
It didn't work out that way. Yes, they had elections and great media coverage of those elections. But democracy?
I think Maliki is on the road to being another Iraqi dictator. Whether he's of the Stalinist quality of the Assads remains to be seen. But the sad truth is that Iraq has replaced several generations of Sunni dictators with a new generation of Shia dictator.
In Afghanistan, the Americans imagined that if they just shot some Taliban, freedom would blossom where opium poppies once bloomed. Women would leave their burqas at home and go to brand new schools.
We've fought a war in Afghanistan for more than a decade. It doesn't fix the local problems. It takes a huge amount of blood and treasure on the United States side, and it doesn't end up with things being fixed.
But the West is now kind of coming to terms with knowing the failures of the Bush and Blair administrations targeting of Afghanistan and targeting of Iraq and Yemen. People are now coming to terms with the boring war, the tedious war, the war that they don't really have the appetite to feed.
However much idealism was in the package itself was the war on terror.
والشعبية لدحر الإرهاب ودحر الإرهاب أسلحة ذات طابع هجومي على الإرهاب
قضاء على الإرهابيين. يكون إرهابيون يحملون فكر القاعدة
وأمر بإني أواجه العنف والإرهاب المحتمل.
And when you look at the Zawahris and we look at the Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawis that gave birth to the ideologies of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, I mean, both of them spent lots of time, heavy time, in prison, without human rights, with the abandonment of the rule of law, with no access to kind of, to a lawyer or even the most basic treatment.
Was it the Arab Spring that unleashed the dogs of war, or was it the war on terror 10 years before? More importantly, what will the future bring?
The tendency is to start reading these phenomena, that escalation to violence, in a very domestic and very localized way. So this is the problem in Iraq. This is the problem in Syria. That's what's happening in Libya. One thing is to continue to look at the past, or even at the present, that just changes continuously. But we try to also look at the future of the Arab world, the future of the Arab uprisings, to try to look at the trends and where this region is heading probably will help escape the details and the localities of issues into the bigger picture.
The bigger picture is the struggle against centuries of autocracy.
The Tunisian revolution is the origin of the Arab Spring. But there is no spring.
Many observers at the beginning of the Arab Spring underestimated how powerful the counter-revolutionary forces were. And we're definitely now seeing the counter-revolution sweep the table.
When you destroy a party or when you destroy a political bloc, an Islamist bloc, the Muslim Brotherhood or whoever, once you've destroyed them, where will that constituency find a political home? And also, how will it react? If you put someone in a corner, in a very violent corner, then you cannot expect them to react without violence.
The people today, they are like pessimistic. Some of them, they even hate the revolution. Those people, they just want things to happen, fast, which is impossible. Democracy, freedom, is something that you deserve. It's something that, that you get as a gift.
The Arab Spring was an extraordinary attempt to change millennium of Arab and Middle Eastern history.
Revolution is an ongoing process. It's going to take time.
We have very few examples in history of countries that have made rapid and non-violent transitions to successful democracy.
We are aware, for example, like in France, after the revolution, it took 300 years to make the first republic, first stable republic.
It wasn't until the second half of the 20th century, that is to say 150 years after France's first transition, that you got what is generally accepted to be stable, consolidated democracy in France in the form of the Fifth Republic. And it's the Fifth Republic because it's the fifth try at democracy.
Egypt, for example, never had a serious election in 5,000 years of history. Tried to vault from that history of autocracy in one step to modern reformist democracy. It's not a surprise it didn't work.
And similar stories can be told about other major European countries. We all know how Italy and Germany's first transitions to democracy turned out.
Look at Europe in the last 30 years, 25, 30 years. They fragmented in Yugoslavia, etc. And even in places like Spain, where, the Catalonians are thinking of seceding.
Even now Scotland could secede from UK.
This is in prosperous countries, advanced Western democracies, this is a trend as well.
You don't make that jump in one step. The United States didn't make that jump in one step. Europe didn't make that jump in one step. Eastern Europe didn't make it. The Arab world tried to do it and found out it was a bridge too far.
When it comes to the real objectives of the revolution that people went to the streets for and they have been killed for, is the dignity, is the social equality, is employment, is the fight against corruption. I think we have a long way to say that we have succeeded in our revolution.
There's a middle way, a democratic route, a reformist route. Sooner or later, it will triumph, but it's going to take a long time in soil that is really not very fertile for producing it.
How did so many rival social and political factions come together? We're talking about Islamists, religious activists, nationalists, liberals, human rights activists, women, poor, rich, middle class. They came together and created a critical mass.
The revolution has an identity, but it doesn't have a leader. It has an identity, but it doesn't have a leader.
Beyond the idea of dignity, it was leaderless. The Arab uprising phenomenon was leaderless.
A revolution shouldn't have a leader. It should have people behind it. And I think the identity of the revolution is youth. The key word is youth.
أنت سيرك إمام وأنا يسيرني ضميري. تخزر لي كي على الوضع على اللي تعيشوا بلادي على وضعيتي.
Raps about the situation in the country, the future in the country, the past of the country, and extremist groups who wants to impose their ideology.
The revolution started for me at the high school. I was 17, I was like the good student. And I launched the strike in my high school. Police officers came for me in the high school, took me, and I have been tortured for 3 days. I still have the marks of cigarettes. I did my job, too. Because since the first moment, I told them clearly, I'm not criminal. I didn't have any crime. I don't have to prove an innocence. I am already innocent. I said it clearly to officers when they were beating me. I'm not just one in this kind of approach. I have many friends in Egypt, in Yemen, in Morocco, in France. We discuss every day. We discuss about what to do, how to do it. We are not activists or bloggers, all this stuff. We are just some ethic militants. This is a revolution about humanity. A revolution about all and for all. It's not a revolution for a caste or a class. It's a revolution of human being. The history of humanity can be considered as one human being. For me, it's simple. I'm here. I can do something. I'll do it.
So let's talk about the future. It looks quite miserable and dismal today. Do you have any hope for the future?
I am not pessimistic. I see that I have missions and duties to fulfill because history doesn't make itself. History doesn't reach good or better by itself. Humans make history which is worthy of them, and they are worth of it. I think that as we, as an Arab world and Arab societies, have entered the logic of great historical change that is present in all crutches in the process of change. First off, the people who are making changes are the ones who are forced from politics, and among them are the leftist parties. And I was part of the Syrian Communist Party. The Syrian Communist Party was looking for the working class, and then when they couldn't find it, they said, we are the working class. Today, the working class has started a revolution. It didn't wait for a party, it didn't wait for me, it didn't wait for anyone. This is, at the societal level, is a historical event of major importance. I used to write, bring politics back to the society and the society back to the politics. And the revolution did that. That's the summary of the revolution.
Is the violence succeeding in breaking the revolution?
No, it won't break the revolution because of a very notable reason. The amount of resistance that has come out of this revolution is so massive that it would be impossible for the authorities to contain it as much as they tried.
What happened in the last 3.5 years has been a compression of things that happened in Western democracies over 2 centuries.
So we don't actually have a fatigue from a democracy that has not even been born.
It's a chaotic situation which suddenly removed some of these autocrats. Others, of course, you have war like in Syria and Iraq. We have to get through this. It's a very difficult, violent moment, and there will be problems for the years ahead. But at some point, the reasonable forces in these societies, who are the majority, I'm convinced, in Arab societies, will somehow find a way to come together and then drive out the violent minorities and have normal functioning countries.
Actually, we sat down with a few young people.
My name is Mohammed El-Swifi. I'm from Egypt.
My name is Saad Sandawi. I am from Morocco.
I am Tunisian, of course.
Algeria, Tunisia, etc. There's no way of talking about the future of the Arab world without hearing the youth of the Arab world, right? What was interesting about all of them is that they were all optimistic.
We managed to get rid of dictatorship. We managed to kick Ben Ali out.
I'm not only optimistic about Tunisia, I'm optimistic about the youth in this whole region. I do believe in revolution, personally.
I do also.
Everyone believes in revolution?
Yes.
Yeah. It needs time. This is a long-term goal.
Arabs youth, they're not giving up.
Do you think that we're gonna stop after all these challenges? No. So we are always on the move. Young people are moving, we are motivated, and we are not gonna stop.
I also believe, and I hope, I have to keep hoping that Tunisian youth and all the other will work together one day. One day they will achieve what the other generation couldn't do.
We can't establish it now, or within 2 years or 5 year term. Maybe within 10 years we'll not establish it. We need a whole generation.
This is a painful stage that we have to go through. The whole world now is watching probably what's going on here. We are saddened to see this, that we are living and witnessing this painful stage that we have to go through. All societies went through this, and we have just to slug it in and keep on going.
And like childbirth, it's painful but beautiful. And this is a process that has just started. We've seen the voices of citizens expressed. We've seen a public space being created where bad guys and good guys work. What we haven't seen is the full blossoming of Arab citizenship. When that happens, once Arabs have the rights of citizenship, they can then create the societies that they want.
Look, it's easy to be pessimistic, even cynical about what's going on in the Arab world. Watching those harsh images come to us every day and every night could make anyone lose hope. But when the region is divided between the forces of despair and dismemberment on the one side and the forces of hope and promise on the other, cynicism is morally irresponsible, even cowardly. Because who are we to stand on the sideline and belittle the dreams of those who are struggling and dying every day for freedom and justice? It really shouldn't be so hard to choose between the dark forces of the past and the bright possibilities of the future.